Mike had never been a big reader when he was younger, but after being sent away to a young offenders institute for 8 months, he started getting through 2 or 3 books a week. They were a fantastic release, first from the fear, then from the drudgery of the place. Now, they were a part of his life. He usually read fiction, but his gran, who he thought was the coolest 68-year-old in the world, had recently sent him one about an American couple who became self-sufficient. They were strict vegetarians like Mike, and everything about the book lit a fire in his gut. And the way things were going, learning how to live off the land was pretty valuable knowledge to boot. He heard noises from the kitchen and assumed Emma had started breakfast. He hoped she'd bring him some coffee. Mike flipped his bookmark to where he'd left off and began reading, but the stress of the night had caught up with him, and rather than invigorating him, the words on the page had a soporific effect. After a paragraph, he started dozing, and his eyelids began to feel like lead. He put the book down and stood up. He slapped himself across the face a couple of times, and then got down onto the floor and started doing press-ups. Down, up, clap, down, up, clap. He'd always kept himself in good shape. Before he went away, he'd played rugby and been the captain of the local under-18s cricket team. He kept going. Down, up, clap, down, up. Then he heard a breath that didn't sound like any other that had gone before. He jumped to his feet and looked towards the bed. Alex's last inhalation had seemed louder, more forced, and now there was a pause. A long pause. A very long pause. Then the death rattle, a gurgling exhalation, a disturbing memory rekindled. The sound stopped. 10, 11, 12, 13. No movement. Mike gently took hold of Alex's wrist and felt for a pulse. Nothing. Alex. Alex. Shit. A look of pure anguish swept across Mike's face. He wanted nothing more than to run out of the room, but he knew it wasn't an option. He reached for the black bag labelled RPA. He unzipped it and pulled out a printed document that he'd read a dozen times before. The piece of paper gently floated to the ground as he fumbled with the contents of the bag and took out what looked like a clear, thick, plastic balloon with a hose attached. He carefully placed it on the bed. Although he'd memorized the document, his fastidious nature demanded that he had it there while he worked, so he flattened it out in front of him. Reanimation prevention apparatus. Please note, with scratch victims, reanimation usually occurs between 1 and 10 minutes after the subject has deceased. It is important to act quickly and follow the instructions accurately. Place protective balloon over the head of the deceased, making sure that the nose bracket clamps to the subject's nose bridge. Pull cord around neck until it comes away in your hand. The protective balloon is now sealed. Take hold of pump and compress fully 8 times or until the puncture delivery plunger is fully extended. Twist the base of the plunger counterclockwise until you hear it click. Place palms over end of plunger and push down until no further movement is possible. The procedure is now complete. Please follow disposal instructions on reverse of this document. Mike performed the task as if he had carried this out 1,000 times before. He secured the bag in position, sealed it with ease, and began pumping. A thick plastic plunger juddered upwards, almost as if it were growing out of Alex's eye socket. With each squeeze, more of the device emerged from the thick, clear balloon. By the 8th pump, the tube was fully extended and positioned perfectly to punch through Alex's eye and into his brain. Mike twisted its base counterclockwise until it clicked, just as the instructions demanded. The whole process took only seconds, but it seemed longer. He put his palms over the plunger and then removed them again. He paused. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I'm so sorry." He was frozen. The horror of what he was doing turned his blood to ice. He heard Sammy's laughter from downstairs, and Mike wondered if he'd ever be able to laugh again. He remained motionless, transfixed by the pale, greying face of his stepfather inside the wrinkled plastic balloon. Maybe Alex wouldn't reanimate. Maybe he didn't have to do this to the man who had become his best friend, his dad. Maybe. Suddenly Alex's uncovered eye sprang open, revealing a misty greyness where once there had been brown and white. It was like a cataract had covered up the whole surface of the eye, punctuated only by a misshapen pupil that flared like a drop of black paint falling on a hard surface. It was no longer Alex. It was no longer human.